14th July, 2015. A quiet Tuesday evening on the edge of Liverpool. Two teenagers on a motorbike turned down a narrow street. What happened next was something beyond imagination, and the man believed to be behind it disappears from the country within hours. 5 years later, across Norfolk, a network moving quietly through back roads and storage units until one of its key figures vanishes abroad, leaving only code names and encrypted handles behind. Then, in 2020, detectives in Cheshire begin tracing another web of guns, cocaine, and coded messages sent through a system criminals swore was unbreakable. 3 fugitives with 3 manhunts stretching from Liverpool to Spain and Bulgaria and back to the UK. Each thought they could outrun the law or hide behind technology. But none of them were right. This is the story of the men who ran, the detectives who never stopped looking, and the international operations that finally brought them home. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. It was just after 8:45 p.m. on a warm Tuesday evening on Banks Road, Garston, a quiet stretch on the southern edge of Liverpool. 2 teenagers were riding a scrambler bike, weaving through side streets that ran between the river and the estate. The passenger was 18-year-old Vinnie Waddington, young, local, and by all accounts well known in the area. A blue Audi A3 pulled out from a side street and accelerated toward them. Witnesses later told police they heard the engine roar before the collision, the sound of metal and plastic shattering as the motorbike was rammed off the road. The Audi didn't stop. Its doors opened and a 12-gauge shotgun was fired through the window. Pellets tore through the air at close range. Vinnie was hit in the chest, whereas his friend, Francis Humphreys, was wounded by the spray of shotgun pellets but managed to flee into a nearby garden, shouting for help. Neighbors rushed outside. Some recognized the distinctive Audi. Others tried to keep the teenager alive until paramedics arrived. But the injuries were catastrophic. Vinnie was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at hospital. What seemed like a reckless drive-by was, investigators believed, a targeted attack, fast, deliberate, and brutally efficient. The area was sealed off within minutes. Crime scene officers began a detailed search, recovering shotgun cartridges, pieces of the damaged motorbike, and tire marks showing where the Audi had forced it off the road. The shooting had happened on a short residential stretch lined with terraced houses. Detectives began door-to-door inquiries immediately, collecting witness statements and CCTV footage from nearby properties. Only hours later, the blue Audi A3 was found abandoned on Earp Street, less than a mile from the scene. It had been left locked, with the engine still warm. Inside, officers discovered several personal items, including a Lucozade bottle, later proven to be one of the key evidence. Forensic work also confirmed that the fatal shot was fired from the passenger side of the Audi. Ballistics linked the cartridge to a 12-gauge shotgun, a weapon still missing at the time. The car was registered to Luke Kendrick, who along with Ryan Bate became the first 2 suspects to be arrested. DNA and fingerprint analysis tied both Kendrick and Bate to the car. Investigators determined that the attack was not random. It appeared to stem from an ongoing dispute between local groups in Garston and surrounding areas. The day before the shooting, there had been a confrontation involving David Ungi and Vinnie's older brother, which police believe may have triggered the events that followed. As detectives continued to build their case, they realized the 3rd suspect. By dawn the next morning, one name had started to surface repeatedly in intelligence reports and phone data: David Ungi. He was a familiar face to Merseyside police, connected to known figures in Liverpool's underworld and already under quiet investigation for suspected heroin supply in the area. But while officers prepared to bring him in for questioning, Ungi was already gone. CCTV from the port of Dover, captured less than 24 hours after the shooting, showed him arriving at the ferry terminal with a backpack and boarding a crossing bound for Calais. No hesitation, no visible panic, just a calculated exit. From there, the trail went cold. For detectives, the timing was impossible to ignore. A young man killed in a planned ambush, 2 suspects in custody, and a third vanishing from the country the next day. It looked less like coincidence, more like preparation. Within days, an international arrest warrant was issued. Ungi was believed to have travelled south through France and into Spain, a route long favoured by British criminals seeking refuge along the Costa del Sol, where cash economies and expat enclaves made it easy to disappear. Back in Liverpool, the investigation pressed on. Detectives built a case around Kendrick and Bate, securing life sentences in 2016. Yet, in every report, one name remained marked as at large. Ungi became a ghost figure in the Waddington case, talked about in court, linked to the getaway, but physically absent. As the years passed, his file thickened with fresh intelligence. There were whispers of him running small drug operations in southern Spain, of associates moving between Marbella, Malaga, and Gibraltar. By 2020, the National Crime Agency had officially added him to its most wanted list, describing him as a dangerous fugitive wanted for murder and serious drug supply. Merseyside police kept the case active, feeding new tips into joint operations with the NCA's international unit. Every lead was checked: gyms, storage units, apartment rentals. But for almost 7 years, David Ungi stayed out of reach. Not arrested, not cited. A fugitive who seemed to have built a life in the shadows, convinced he had slipped beyond the reach of UK justice. Each year, intelligence trickled in, fragments of sightings in Spain, whispers from underworld contacts, even unconfirmed reports of him working in a gym near Malaga. Most proved false, but investigators never took his name down. In early 2022, a new lead surfaced. Spanish authorities had traced a British national living under an alias in the town of Coin, a small community set back from the Costa del Sol, known more for its quiet suburbs than criminal hideouts. Surveillance teams from the Spanish National Police began discreetly monitoring a local fitness center where a man matching Ungi's description was seen training regularly, keeping to himself, paying cash. The National Crime Agency was alerted. In coordination with Merseyside Police and the Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, NWROCU, a joint plan was drawn up. Spanish officers would move first, with NCA liaison agents standing by to confirm identity once the arrest was made. Every detail had to be exact. Ungi was believed to be armed and had evaded capture for nearly a decade. On the 5th of May 2022, just after 3 p.m, officers moved in. As Ungi exited the gym, plainclothes police surrounded him and 3 other men. There was no chance to run. The arrest was fast and controlled. Inside his rucksack, investigators found a 9mm Ruger pistol, its serial number removed, along with ammunition, a discovery that not only confirmed his identity, but also added weight to the British case against him. Spanish police footage also showed officers recovering sealed packages of suspected narcotics, believed to be heroin and cannabis packs, but it was strange sources only mentioned handgun and ammunition. Spanish media carried images of the arrest within hours. Ungi in gym clothes, head down, flanked by armed officers. To Merseyside detectives watching from the UK, it marked the end of years of searching. The fugitive they had chased across borders and time zones was finally in custody. In a statement, the NCA called it a significant arrest, part of an operation that had, within the same week, captured multiple fugitives hiding on the Iberian coast. For the investigators who had built the original case in Liverpool, it was proof of a simple truth. Distance, new identities, even time itself, couldn't protect those wanted for murder. But arresting Ungi in Spain was only the beginning. What followed would be another long fight, a process of extradition, hearings, and court proceedings to bring him back to face justice in the United Kingdom. Spanish authorities held him under an international arrest warrant, while the National Crime Agency began formal extradition proceedings. The process required careful coordination between UK prosecutors, the Home Office, and Spanish courts, each step guided by treaty rules and scrutiny over evidence. Ungi was initially remanded in a high-security Spanish facility near Malaga, where extradition hearings began in summer 2022. In court, he appeared calm, quiet, declining to speak at length. His defense team attempted to delay the handover, citing his local residence and alleged ties in Spain, but by November 2022, the appeal was dismissed. The warrant was upheld. Ungi was officially extradited to the UK, flown under police escort to Liverpool John Lennon Airport, and transferred directly into custody. Back on Merseyside, the murder investigation that had once felt like history reopened in full. Ungi was charged with the murder of Vinnie Waddington and attempted grievous bodily harm with intent towards passenger Francis Humphreys. He also faced a separate count related to the possession of a firearm found during his Spanish arrest. When his trial began at Liverpool Crown Court in spring 2023, it attracted wide local attention. For many, it was the conclusion of a story for nearly 8 years. The prosecution presented the familiar sequence of the evidence that we have already discussed. Prosecutors argued that Ungi had fled because he knew he was complicit in the killing. But Ungi's defense painted a different picture. He claimed he had fled out of fear, that he'd been threatened after the shooting and left Liverpool to protect himself, not to hide from guilt. He denied being in the Audi during the attack, denied knowing the weapon existed, and told the court that rumours and old associations had made him a convenient suspect. Forensic experts presented the DNA match from a Lucozade bottle, but the defense countered that the car was used by several people, and that DNA alone could not place him there at the time of the murder. After 15 hours and 46 minutes of deliberation, the jury reached its verdict: not guilty of both murder and attempted grievous bodily harm. In May 2023, David Ungi walked free from the dock, acquitted of the charges that had kept his name on police databases for almost a decade. Yet, for law enforcement, the case was not closed. Ungi remained under investigation for the firearms and drug offences linked to his time in Spain. The fugitive had returned home, but not without a record, and not without the mark of a man whose years on the run had permanently tied him to one of Liverpool's most notorious unsolved mysteries. When the verdict was read in May 2023 and David Ungi was acquitted of murder, the courtroom in Liverpool fell silent. For investigators, it marked the end of one battle and the beginning of another. Though freed of the murder charge, Ungi didn't walk away untouched. Spanish authorities still held convictions against him for firearms and drug offences, stemming from the discoveries made during his arrest in Cohen. The Liverpool case had started in 2015. By 2023, the trial had delivered its verdict, one that split opinion but underscored a deeper truth about law enforcement in the modern age. Ungi's story became a case study for the National Crime Agency and Merseyside Police, an example of how fugitives exploit the geography of Europe to slip between jurisdictions. They hide among expats, adopt aliases, and rely on outdated assumptions that cross-border cooperation is slow or ineffective. Ungi's arrest closed one chapter, yet even as his story ended in Spain, another was unfolding in the East. The next began in the flatlands of Norfolk, far from the chaos of Liverpool, but connected by the same coded silence that defined the new age of organised crime. In early 2020, detectives from Norfolk Police and the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, ERSOU, began tracing the movements of a suspected drugs network, quietly moving multi-kilogram shipments of cocaine across the east of England. The group's coordination was meticulous, like all the other organised crime groups without any trials, by using encrypted communications platform EncroChat. Among the thousands of recovered handles identified after EncroChat was cracked by European law enforcement, two stood out to investigators: Warnfire and Tidyfly. Both accounts appeared to belong to the same user, later identified as Benjamin McCann, a 32-year-old from Norfolk. His messages, recovered from EncroChat servers, revealed a detailed blueprint of the operation: bulk cocaine supplies sourced from contacts in the northwest, adulterated to stretch profits, and redistributed through a network of couriers and stash houses spread across Norfolk and Suffolk. The tone of the messages was cool and transactional: codes, weights, and sums. Images attached to the chats showed stamped cocaine blocks wrapped in plastic, each marked with distinct logos used to track batches. One conversation referenced a drop in Blowfield, a quiet village outside Norwich, valued at £155,000. Another described delivery schedules. Investigators cross-referenced the data with surveillance logs, ANPR hits, and seized devices from earlier arrests. Slowly, the encrypted usernames began linking to real-world activity. Vehicles seen at handover points, burner phones switching locations in sync, and cash deposits made through couriers using coded language lifted directly from the messages. By mid-2021, evidence against McCann had grown strong enough for a warrant, but he was nowhere to be found. As raids swept through Norfolk, he vanished, slipping out of the country before officers could make the arrest. When the National Crime Agency and Crime Stoppers launched a new 12 Most Wanted campaign in January 2022, his face appeared on the list, one of several fugitives believed to be hiding in Spain. He lived under assumed identities, moving between short-term rentals and low-profile hotels, changing numbers and using different SIM cards. But while many fugitives chose to settle in the familiar havens of the Costa del Sol, McCann's trail took an unexpected turn eastward. By late 2021, NCA analysts were tracing bank activity and border movements that pointed not to Spain but to Bulgaria. The shift was deliberate, a move to a country where his name and face meant nothing, and where the watchful eye of British policing didn't extend so easily. He carried at least 2 passports, one genuine but in another person's name, and another forged document with new identity details. Together, they allowed him to move across Europe undetected, using a combination of short flights and land crossings to avoid the scrutiny that airports in Spain and France now imposed on known fugitives. The false documentation also allowed him to check into accommodation without alerting local authorities, blending among digital nomads and business travelers. Back in the UK, the NCA's fugitive unit, working with Interpol and Bulgarian liaison officers, continued building a profile of his life abroad. They mapped financial footprints, travel patterns, and communications that still occasionally betrayed traces of his old EncroChat habits. In January 2022, McCann's name went public again when the NCA and Crime Stoppers relaunched their Most Wanted campaign, appealing to anyone in Spain or mainland Europe who might recognize him. But even with his face printed across news outlets, McCann remained elusive, shifting countries, changing phones, and maintaining the quiet anonymity that had kept him hidden for 2 years. It wouldn't last. By mid-2022, a signal, small but significant, would reveal his new location, triggering an international operation that finally brought the search to an end. In the end, it was a quiet hotel in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, not a villa in Spain, where the 2-year search for Benjamin McCann finally came to an end. Acting on intelligence shared between the National Crime Agency, the Spanish Guardia Civil, and the Bulgarian National Police, officers moved in on the morning of the 13th of June 2022. The operation was timed to precision. Plainclothed Bulgarian officers waited for confirmation from the NCA's liaison team in Sofia before entering the building. Just after dawn, they moved through the corridor and knocked on the door. When the man answered, they already knew who he was. On the table inside, officers found 2 passports. McCann was arrested without resistance. Within minutes, Bulgarian police confirmed his identity through fingerprints supplied by the NCA. To avoid escape or interference, he was transported immediately to a secure detention facility in Sofia. The NCA issued a brief statement confirming that another of the UK's most wanted fugitives had been captured abroad. Extradition proceedings began almost immediately. Within weeks, the Bulgarian court approved the British request, and McCann was escorted under armed guard back to the United Kingdom later that summer. landing at Stansted Airport and transferred directly into the custody of Norfolk Police. The Benjamin McCann case became another chapter in a growing pattern, one that revealed both the reach of organized crime and the quiet evolution of how it's fought. For investigators, it was a revolution in policing. The Norfolk investigation highlighted how local operations were rarely local anymore. Financial disruption also remained central to these operations. Detectives didn't just dismantle supply routes, they targeted profits. Though no asset recovery figures were released for McCann's case, police confirmed that confiscation proceedings and lifestyle analyses were ongoing, tracing the proceeds of the Norfolk network. It reflected a broader strategy: hit traffickers where it hurts most. Presented with the evidence, McCann chose not to contest the charges. In November 2023, at Norwich Crown Court, he admitted conspiracy to supply cocaine. The Crown described him as a key figure within the Norfolk network. For Norfolk Police and the National Crime Agency, the sentencing closed one of the region's most complex drug investigations. McCann was sentenced to 10 years in prison on the 17th of November 2023. His co-conspirators had already faced justice 2 years earlier: Dean Enifer, jailed for 8 years and 3 months, and Peter McKenna for 7 years and 10 months, following their convictions in August 2021. As McCann began his sentence, detectives in the Northwest were already closing in on another fugitive, one whose network ran deeper, darker, and armed. By early 2020, detectives from Cheshire Police's Serious and Organised Crime Unit, SOCU, were quietly tracking the movements of a network suspected of distributing cocaine, cannabis, and firearms across the northwest of England. At the centre of their investigation was a man whose digital trail would soon give him away: Dean Garforth, a 31-year-old from Regency Park, Widnes, known to local intelligence units as a figure operating at the higher levels of supply chains rather than on the street. He was another victim of the EncroChat. Like many other stories, his digital trail also provided agencies a valuable source to counter drug trafficking in the UK. Among the recovered data, one user handle appeared repeatedly in high-level transactions: Slickcliff. Messages under that name detailed bulk drug shipments, gun deals, and coded arrangements for cash movements. The user discussed half-bricks, bits, and tools for drugs and weapons, alongside the logistics of collection, storage, and payment. From March to July 2020, Slickcliff coordinated large deliveries of cocaine and cannabis, often referencing northwest distribution routes, and associates operating in Liverpool, Widnes, and Warrington. Photos exchanged through the platform showed vacuum-sealed drug packages and firearms hidden in modified vehicles. Analysis later confirmed the account belonged to Dean Garforth. The first tangible break in the investigation came on 24th May 2020, when a white Ford Transit van failed to stop for officers on Bradley Way, Widnes. After a short pursuit, the vehicle was found abandoned at Norlands Park. Inside, police recovered a mobile phone, later forensically linked to Garforth. Digital analysis of the handset confirmed it had been used to access EncroChat and communicate with known contacts in ongoing drug and gun supply operations. As investigators built their timeline, they executed a warrant at Garforth's home in October 2020. The property appeared recently vacated and no trace of its owner. Dean Garforth had fled the country, vanishing into mainland Europe, and was later found in Spain. By that point, the evidence was overwhelming. Garforth's messages mapped an organized criminal enterprise, a network that supplied tons of narcotics and traded firearms across county lines. His disappearance transformed an intelligence operation into a fugitive manhunt, one that would stretch more than 2 years and end in dramatic fashion on the streets of Marbella. For 2 years, he lived off the radar, moving through the British expat communities of Marbella and Nueva Andalusia, where again, cash-in-hand economies and transient residents made it easy to blend in. Detectives from the National Crime Agency, NCA, and Cheshire's Serious and Organised Crime Unit spent hundreds of hours trying to trace him. Leads came and went, unconfirmed sightings near Malaga, reports of him working casual labour jobs, rumours of him still operating within drug networks abroad. But each trail ran cold. Garforth had cut ties, changed phones, and adopted a low profile. By January 2022, frustration turned to exposure. The NCA and Crime Stoppers launched a new Most Wanted campaign featuring 12 fugitives believed to be hiding in Spain. Among them, Dean Garforth, listed as an alleged drug and firearms supplier from Widnes. For Garforth, the pressure was now visible, his face broadcast across news sites and expat forums throughout southern Spain. Still, he stayed put. Investigators later learned he had been living quietly in Nueva Andalucia, a residential area just inland from Marbella's tourist strips. He used an e-bike to move around, rarely staying in one place for long, avoiding vehicles that could be tracked. When he did go out, he dressed to blend in. Sportswear, sunglasses, a cap pulled low. But on 24th October 2022, the surveillance finally paid off. Acting on intelligence from the NCA's liaison officers in Spain, plainclothed officers from the Spanish National Police moved in as Garforth cycled down a side street. When he realized he was surrounded, he rode straight into one of the officers, knocking him to the ground before being tackled and restrained. For the NCA, it was another major breakthrough in a campaign that had already taken down several fugitives that year. For Garforth, it was the end of 2 years on the run. After his arrest, Garforth was held in custody by the Spanish National Police while extradition proceedings began. The National Crime Agency, working alongside the Home Office Extradition Unit, coordinated the legal process to return him to the UK, a move strongly supported by Cheshire Constabulary, who had been pursuing him since 2020. On 14th March 2023, under police escort, Garforth was officially extradited from Spain to the United Kingdom. He arrived at a secure airfield and was transferred immediately into the custody of Cheshire Police's Serious and Organised Crime Unit. Upon his return, he was charged with conspiracy to supply Class A and B drugs along with the conspiracy to supply firearms and ammunition. At Chester Crown Court, on the 25th of January 2024, Garforth pleaded guilty to all 3 conspiracy charges. Garforth's punishment didn't end with punishment. Following his sentencing, financial investigators from Cheshire Police began a proceeds of crime inquiry to recover assets from his criminal activity. Their findings revealed that Garforth had benefited by approximately £1.53 million from his illegal operations. Although most of those funds were unrecoverable, officers traced £40,331 in remaining assets, including 50% equity in his Widnes home and a KTM off-road motorcycle. At a confiscation hearing on the 11th of February 2025, the court ordered Garforth to repay that full amount. If unpaid, additional prison time would follow. For Cheshire Police, the order sent a clear message. Even when fugitives are caught, the fight doesn't stop at conviction. It extends to dismantling the profits of organised crime. He was sentenced to 19 years and 6 months in prison. What do you think about the cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of UK Crime Documentaries.